Kyle Larson led 284 of 505 laps. He swept both stages. He controlled Bristol Motor Speedway for enormous stretches of the afternoon. And when the checkered flag flew, he climbed out of his number 5 Hendrick Motorsports Chevrolet in third place. Not first. Ty Gibbs, a driver who led just the final 25 laps, took the trophy. That is the central fact of the Food City 500 on April 12, 2026, and it demands a full explanation. Because this was not a story about a driver who had a bad day. This was a story about a driver who had one of the best days of the season and still went home without the win. Bristol Motor Speedway is a 533-mile concrete oval, tight, unforgiving, and historically brutal for passing. It is known as the world's fastest half mile, and it rewards drivers who understand its rhythm. Before race day, the storyline was clear. Kyle Larson versus Ryan Blaney. Larson entered the Food City 500 still winless through the first 7 races of 2026, but he was sitting 6th in the championship standings with strong underlying speed all season. Bristol had historically been one of his best tracks, and he arrived talking like a man who already understood the puzzle. Someone who knew how the groove shifts lap by lap and how traffic navigation matters more than most people realize. Ryan Blaney entered with equal momentum. He clocked the fastest car in practice across 15, 20, 25, and 30-lap runs, starting from the pole position in his number 12 Team Penske Ford. Before a single green flag lap, Blaney was already the benchmark. Then there was Ty Gibbs, starting 5th in the number 54 Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota, with no wins in 130 Cup Series starts, carrying both the weight of a famous family legacy and years of outside criticism. Nobody was seriously tracking Gibbs as a contender heading into the afternoon. When the green flag dropped, Larson immediately justified every bit of pre-race confidence. He started from 8th position. He was not handed the lead. He had to earn it through traffic on one of the toughest tracks in the series for passing. By lap 44, Larson had charged all the way to the front, getting past Blaney before the race was even a quarter complete. From that point, the number 5 Chevrolet simply took over. Larson won Stage 1 over Christopher Bell, Blaney, and Chase Briscoe. Then in Stage 2, a 125-lap stretch through the middle of the race, Larson led all but one lap. He swept both stages at Bristol for the 3rd time in his career, becoming the 9th driver in history to surpass 2,000 laps led at the track. That is not just a strong afternoon. That is historic race control. The reason Larson's dominance looked so clean during those first 2 stages had a great deal to do with what was happening on the other side of pit road. Blaney's number 12 crew ranked 31 fastest out of 37 teams on pit road at Bristol. Entering the race, that same crew had already lost 85 positions on pit road through the first 7 races, a number that was 30 spots worse than the next closest competitor. Larson addressed this directly after the race. Thankfully, Blaze pit crew, I don't know what was happening to their day on pit road, but it was putting him behind and having to work, and allowed me to settle in, lead laps, and barely hang on to stages. He went further. I knew if the 12 ever had a good pit stop or even a better restart, which both of those started happening, he would be tough to hold off. That quote tells the full story of the first half of the race. But before Blaney's crew issues could even fully resolve themselves, Larson had already dealt himself a problem of his own creation. During Stage 2, Larson misheard a radio call from his spotter. He thought he heard 15 laps remaining in the stage. The actual number was 50. The result was that he pushed the number 5 Chevrolet significantly harder, significantly earlier than the strategy called for. He burned through more tire life than planned, and expended energy on a run that should have been managed carefully. he still recovered to win the stage, which tells you precisely how fast that car was. But the cost of that mistake did not show up immediately. It showed up later, in tire wear, in the rhythm of the car, and in his ability to sustain pace on the long final runs. Meanwhile, Ty Gibbs was doing something entirely different. After getting shuffled back to 14th in the early laps, he spent the first two stages fighting just to stay in the picture. But lap by lap, he moved forward, consistent, patient, and largely unnoticed. He ended stage 2 in 7th place. Crew chief Tyler Allen was already pre-planning strategy scenarios for the final stage, preparing for every possible caution scenario that could flip the race on its head. That moment arrived on lap 478. Chase Elliott spun to bring out the 8th caution of the afternoon, with 22 laps remaining. The field was suddenly faced with a critical decision. The three main contenders went in three completely different directions. Gibbs stayed out. He held track position on old tires and inherited the race lead. Carson Hocevar, Chase Briscoe, Denny Hamlin, and Tyler Reddick also stayed out. Larson came down pit road and took 2 fresh tires, restarting 6th. Blaney took 4 fresh tires and restarted 7th. Over the team radio, Gibbs had delivered his message to Allen with total clarity. "I don't want to give up track position at all." Allen honored that call, and it set up everything that followed. Blaney and Larson charged hard on fresh rubber. Larson raced forward to 3rd almost immediately. Blaney also closed ground quickly, but Gibbs held the line from the front, defending track position on tires that were nearly 100 laps old. Just when it appeared Gibbs might manage the gap to the finish, the race took one more violent turn. On lap 498, Kyle Busch spun Riley Herbst. What appeared to be deliberate retaliation for an earlier incident. The 9th caution flew. The race went to overtime, the first overtime period at Bristol in 11 years. The field reset for a 2-lap shootout. Gibbs out front on old tires. Blaney and Larson directly behind him with rubber that was nearly 100 laps fresher. On paper, Gibbs should not have survived it. Blaney went side by side with Gibbs through the final lap, sliding and drag racing toward the checkered flag. At the line, Gibbs crossed first by just 0.055 seconds, the closest finish at Bristol since Rusty Wallace beat Ernie Irvan by 1 foot in April of 1991. Larson finished 0.229 seconds behind in 3rd. Former driver and analyst Kyle Petty pointed out afterward that what separated the result was not just strategy, it was the mutual respect all three drivers showed on the track in those final 2 laps. Gibbs held his lane, did not block, and did not panic. Blaney and Larson raced him hard but clean. Victory Lane at Bristol carried far more weight than a standard trophy presentation. Gibbs is the son of the late Coy Gibbs, who passed away unexpectedly in his sleep on November 6, 2022. The night after Ty won the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series championship, after climbing from the number 54 Toyota, Gibbs was immediately surrounded by his mother Heather, his grandfather Joe, and his cousin Jackson Gibbs, who serves as a tire changer on the number 50. "I'd love for my father to have seen this," Gibbs said. "I knew he knew it was going to happen and expected it as well." Joe Gibbs added, "When I think about Coy, he brought Ty up the entire time. I know he's probably watching." Heather Gibbs put the win in its fullest context. "My husband. I think he would have been so happy. I think that's what's probably the hardest part today, right? So bittersweet." This win came in Gibbs' 130 honest Cup Series start, after near misses at Darlington in 2024 and Chicago in 2025, and after years of outside criticism about whether he could compete at the Cup level. Gibbs became the sixth NASCAR driver to earn his first Cup victory at Bristol, joining Dale Earnhardt, 1979, Rusty Wallace, 1986, Ernie Irvan, 1990, Elliott Sadler, 2001, and Kurt Busch, 2002. Even Ryan Blaney, who finished just 0.055 seconds behind, acknowledged the weight of the moment. You never forget your first one. That's for sure. Even though I'm bummed we didn't win the race, I'm happy that Ty was able to get his first win. Blaney also acknowledged Ty's dealt with a lot of criticism, I feel like, from the outside. I feel like he's handled it pretty well, and it's good to see that he's been able to prove himself on the racetrack. Bristol exposed several fault lines that will define the 2026 championship picture going forward. Blaney's number 12 crew lost 11 positions on pit road at Bristol alone. Blaney was blunt in his assessment after the race. We got to get it better if we're going to keep competing and get cars that can win races. We got to clean that up. For Larson, the result is not alarming in isolation. He now has 5 top 10 finishes in 8 races and sits 6th in the standings with 260 points. But a 32-race winless drought for a defending Cup Series champion, dating back to May 2025 at Kansas Speedway, demands explanation. And a race where he led 284 laps and finished third only deepens the question. Tyler Reddick continues to lead the championship, but his points advantage over Blaney shrank to just 62 points after Bristol. Gibbs, meanwhile, now carries a 6-race top 10 streak into the next event, having finally converted sustained momentum into a victory. On the Hendrick side, the day was far worse beyond Larson alone. William Byron started from the rear due to unapproved adjustments and finished 5 laps down, while Alex Bowman, returning from a 4-race absence due to vertigo, was wrecked out and finished last. The NASCAR Cup Series heads to Kansas Speedway on April 19 for the Advent Health 400. The story writes itself. Kansas Speedway is the exact site of Kyle Larson's last Cup Series win, which came on May 11, 2025. Every race since that day has added to a drought that now stands at 32 consecutive starts. Hendrick Motorsports has won 3 of the last 4 races at Kansas, with both Larson and Chase Elliott winning there in 2025. The track sets up well for the number 5 Chevrolet. The speed has been present all season, but as Bristol made absolutely clear, speed alone does not close a race. The best car at Bristol did not win. The most laps led at Bristol did not win. What won was one radio call, the nerve to stay out on old tires, and 25 laps of holding off 2 former champions on a 2-lap shootout. The question heading into Kansas is no longer about pace for Larson. It never really was. The question is whether strategy, communication, and timing can all align at the moment it matters most. At Bristol, they did not, and 32 races of waiting is already the longest winless stretch in Hendrick Motorsports history for a defending champion. Do you think Kyle Larson finally breaks the drought at Kansas? Drop your prediction in the comments, hit like, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.